Welcome to the Whole Enchilada, a community of high achievers that fight the status quo, rebel against mediocrity, and make life happen. Let's go. Hey, Enchilada Nation, really excited to have you back with me today for another great conversation with another phenomenal entrepreneur and a good friend of mine, Cory Berdinner. Cory, thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Just to give a quick background, and then I'll turn it over to you, Cory, to give a little bit more in-depth background on you. Cory and I met several years ago, and I've seen Cory in multiple capacities. And as you know, the message of the Whole Enchilada is how do we succeed in life across multiple platforms? And Cory, you're one of those guys that has been fun for me because I've seen you in capacity as a CEO of a company. I've seen you grow and build your own real estate team. You and your wife do a phenomenal job, one of the top real estate teams in the state of Utah. You and I have partnered and invested in several things, the real estate brokerage, a title company, and some other things. You've built a pretty impressive investment portfolio. You're constantly taking your fitness seriously. Like, you're one of those guys that really embodies, from my perspective, what the Whole Enchilada is about. And so I'm really excited about diving into this conversation today. But before we dive in, give our listeners just a little bit of a background about you, what you've done professionally, personally, a little bit about your family, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Thank you. And so I'm originally from Upper Michigan, from a small town up there. So kind of a neat area, but very small, 5,000 people in our city. And I left there and I went in the military. I was in the military for a long time. I spent 21 years active duty, chasing bad guys all over the world, and learned a lot in a bunch of different capacities in that respect. Got my education out of there, both in the School of Hard Knocks and some actual schooling, that kind of thing. So then real quickly, we went, our last duty station was here at Hill in Utah. And we said, hey, it's time to retire. From that, it's a young man's game. We did some serious injuries doing some of those things that we did. But anyways, we decided we would stay here, and we built a real estate company now to where we're at. So yeah, that's where you and I originally met. I was the CEO of the office. And it was interesting because that office was a challenge at the beginning. Now it's flourishing, it's doing great. So we're glad to see that happening. And then, from there, we moved into building our real estate empire, if you will. And we've been working on that. So I pretty much left home when I was 18 with, a pair of flip-flops and a driver's license and $20. And now we've got a, multi-million-dollar portfolio when it comes to real estate and short-term rentals and long-term rentals, all that fun stuff. So, and we run a pretty successful real estate team. So that's kind of the little version of us.
The little version, and you're being modest by saying a pretty successful real estate team. It's really incredible what you and Rhonda have built. I know a lot of agents aspire to run a team like you guys. And then you have two incredible kids, three incredible kids, which, as I've got to know them and watched them through your social media and things like that, it's also been cool to see that they're following in your footsteps, that they tend to really embrace life and things that they're tackling too, which doesn't surprise me, knowing that you and Rhonda are their parents. Yeah,
my 20-year-old owns a home already, so we're excited about that. She's doing good things, and all of them are. Actually, that's just one example, but yeah, fantastic. Awesome. 2 girls and a boy, and then of course my wife Rhonda is my partner in everything in life. So.
Yeah. Well, let's actually start there, because I don't think you and I have ever dove into this. But I think it's interesting. Here you were 21 years in the military and all over the world. Like you were gone a lot, and then now you and Rhonda are hooked at the hip and building these businesses together. And this might be a better question for her at some point, but it's interesting. What was the transition like from being separated so much in very different roles? And I imagine you guys were still teammates in what you were trying to accomplish, but thousands of miles between you, to now we're in the same household every day. Like we're making things happen in a different way. What was that transition like for you guys?
It was a good transition, actually. We spent a lot of time apart, so that's accurate. And of course, communication was key when it came to making all of that work, because it's tough. I mean, a military spouse, they're a different breed. They take care of a lot of things. You got to pretty much remove one of the people out of the home, and then they've got to take care of everything. So all those roles are assumed for the most part for whatever period of time that is. And then it's weird. The integration is almost as hard as the leaving. So kind of a strange dynamic, because everything starts to flow, and then all of a sudden here we are, we're gonna shake it up again.
Yeah.
But then when we retired, we knew, like, hey, we've done a lot of time apart. Let's build this together. And also, anybody that's worked for the government, they know that the government's set up, and I always joke that it's set up for mediocrity. Everybody strives for mediocrity when it comes to that. Not a knock on anybody individually, but it's just kind of a weird bureaucracy. It's a giant, thing that it's tough to stand out, and somebody else is getting credit and all that kind of stuff. So it was interesting to transition to where what we worked on was for us and for our family, and for what we wanted to build for the future.
Yeah, I think
we jumped on that. We like that. That was a good launching point for us. That mentality, that plan.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think you pointed out something really interesting, that idea of the way the government, any branch of the government really is set up, is people can live in mediocrity there. And because of the base being close to where we live, we still see a lot of people transition out of the military back into real life. It's been interesting to me how many of them take that thought of mediocrity into the next chapter of their life, and don't open it up to bigger opportunities. So when you made that transition out of the military, and you were sitting there and you had every choice in front of you of what to do next, did you already have some clarity on what you wanted to do? Or how did you guys approach, like, we know we want to build something together, how do we choose which path is going to be the most fun for us, but also create the biggest opportunity for our family?
Yeah, we knew we wanted to do something that, like I said, that when we put work in, it was working for us and for our family. So I thought about this a couple of years before we got out. Actually, I knew I wanted to get into real estate. I didn't know what capacity at that time, because you just don't know what you don't know. So actually, we were stationed in Texas, and good old Lee Stern. Lots of people in Utah will know who that is.
Yeah.
She actually called me because I had signed up, for an online, I think it was Stringham or whatever, and I was starting my hours already. And she said, "Hey, what the heck are you doing? You're in Texas." So anyways, we had started planning back then, and then I told her, "Hey, I'm working for Uncle Sam right now. When I get out, I'm putting millions in the bank." And she was like, "Hey, I think I kind of like you." So we hit it off, and then we got here. That was kind of the catalyst to Keller Williams and all of that side of things.
That's awesome. So as you launched your real estate career, let's shift forward to building your first business. What was your approach to that? Were there specific skills that you learned in the previous 21 years, or really the previous years of your life in general, that all of a sudden you were like, these are attributes for me, these are assets for me that I can apply moving forward? What was that approach to building your business and stepping into that role as from government employee, military, to I'm my own boss, I'm an entrepreneur, here we go?
Yeah, I got to do a lot of different things while I was active. So I was blessed to be able to lead large groups and small groups when I was in. So I looked at it as, when I took over as the team leader, as you know, team leader is kind of looked upon as probably the hardest job in Keller Williams, for sure, the way that it's set up. And I know if you don't have a plan, you're planning to fail. So first off, what does that look like? Talking to smart people to figure out what should that plan look like. Once I figured that out, then it was a matter of execution. And of course, that comes into consistency, all those fun things. I'm a big fan of owning it and looking for things to do to make sure the work is done.
It's funny having you say a couple of these words, because in anticipation of our conversation today, I just took some time to kind of reflect on my interactions with you. I'm like, what are the descriptive words that I would use to describe Cory and how they show up? And one is hard work. The other one that came up that you just said is consistency. That's I was in a conversation with someone the other day that I told them, you know what, I would take someone that was consistent, even like if they were consistently 80%, over someone that was 100% for 20% of the time, and 80% of the time you had no clue how they were going to show up. I'd rather just let this business, along with a lot of things in life, is just be consistently show up, and then execute. That's the other one I thought of when this morning when I was thinking of you, is just like, man, he knows how to be consistent, and he knows how to get things done and execute.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And those are big things. You know, some of the things that I did, I was law enforcement, and a lot of special tactics things that we did. There was the consistency and putting the time in and doing that time and time again. You know, you got to be prepared for the game, so to speak, right? If you're not preparing during the game. If you haven't put the time in ahead of time, you're done. So that's big to me. It was drilled into me when I was a young troop, and just kind of carried that through pretty much all aspects of my life. You know.
Yeah. I actually really love that mentality, and that the work you put in beforehand shows up at game time, right? It's the practice, it's running the plays, it's the strategy, all of those things. I think one of the things that's really interesting about entrepreneurship in general, and particularly as a real estate business, is I feel like the game is constantly changing. And so the idea of, well, I'm going to learn it all now I can just go apply it, doesn't necessarily apply. It's, you have to learn it all for today's market, and constantly learning along the way. So what are some of the things that you're doing? I know that you're consistently activities and executing, but what are you doing on a regular basis to stay relevant, staying up, so that you know the plan you're implementing matches the execution that needs to be done on a daily basis in a changing world?
Sure. So flexibility is the key, right? That was a big time saying that we used. And with that comes a lot of intel gathering. And forgive me if I use too many acronyms or military terms, but it just kind of sticks with me through my time. We gather a lot of intel all the time from different sources. So we're masterminding with different people throughout the nation. We're talking to coaches and different things. We want to make sure that we're getting it at different levels too, right? Because where the rubber meets the road is different than somebody that's sitting in a chair, doing something at a higher level at that point. So you got your tactical level and your strategic level, and we're monitoring those all the time through different avenues. Yeah, and that's where we kind of pull what's happening, what's going on, what are the smart ways to do things. Not just also local. We're not afraid to invest, in other parts of the country or do different things, different parts of the world. So yeah, it's a big, it's always intel gathering, being aware of your surroundings, making sure you're putting feelers out there to know who you're dealing with too, right? You got to have trustworthy people that you're pulling information from. So
yeah, I think this is really interesting. I'm taking notes here, because a lot of this I'm thinking through, man, a lot of this is applicable to business right now. So when you're gathering intel, because as you know, I'm a lifelong learner too. I love studying. I sometimes have to like tell myself, stop your morning study. You got to get to work, because I get so pulled into some of these things. It's so interesting. But I think there's so much intel available. What's the process you do of making sure that you're able to sift through that intel or filter that to know like what is relevant to the game plan versus what's smoke and mirrors, and what's blatantly false information? Do you have some guidance of either from the military years or how you do it now, of like you're gathering intel, but how do you sift that down to, this is the most important intel for me that now converts to an actionable game plan?
Sure. When it comes to that kind of stuff, in this realm, simply gathering enough information, right, from different types of sources. So if you want to just go into an echo chamber, like for example, easy one is Twitter or Facebook, one of those type of platforms. They're going to put you into an algorithm and they're going to echo back to you what you want to hear, right? So in order to get away from that, you got to do some live stuff. You got to make some phone calls. You got to talk to some people. You got to have people on the ground. And then you get to know those people and you find out whether or not they're accurate or not. And let's face it, numbers don't lie, right? You're a numbers guy. You like doing spreadsheets and all that stuff.
Yes, I do.
Numbers don't lie. So if I've got a friend out in wherever that's been producing for quite a long time, information that he gives me or she gives me is going to be accurate, right? It's going to be something I can use. And then of course we don't ignore what's going on in the media, right? So you've got, just as an example on that, is you've got Fox and you've got CNN, right?
Mhm.
Doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on, but if you listen to this one and you listen to this one, they're both insane, but you can kind of gather some of that and figure out what in the middle of that might be, hey, this is something that I should research more and get deeper into, that kind of thing. And that's where you talk to your people on the ground. Hey, what's going on with this or that?
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece of this. Is there's so much information available. Do you have a reliable fountain or font of knowledge, a source of knowledge that you can count on? And then we can't take everything for face value. You can't just because you heard it must be true. It was interesting. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to coach and train a room full of CEOs, and CEOs of their own businesses, right? So they are the CEOs, they are the boss. But I wanted them to look at their role as a CEO and as if they were a much bigger organization. And ultimately, a CEO of a much bigger organization, I asked, who do they answer to? Because everyone thinks the CEO, everyone answers to the CEO. And I helped them see the CEO answers to the shareholders and the board of directors. And so one of the ahas we had yesterday in that conversation was that a board of directors isn't necessarily, for most of us as entrepreneurs, aren't people that are sitting actually in a boardroom waiting to hear us, but they're the corral of people we've built around us that are sources of knowledge that are experts in their field that you have on a lifeline to call. Hey, I want to understand this better. What's going on with this, or what do you think about this issue? You and I had this conversation a week ago where you wanted to verify a couple numbers or data that you were studying, and you reached out to me and we talked through it. So it's really important for us to have those people that are almost on like a lifeline for us of like, I know this person, I trust this person, I know the counsel I'm going to get from them is pretty sound, and they have that relationship back with you.
Yeah, and you got to continue to build those relationships, right? A lot of people, they go to a certain point and then they stop. So everywhere you go, I mean, it's not that hard hey, I'm going on vacation, we go to Georgia or something. Well, I've got several agents out there that I'm going to meet with and talk to real quick. I got, whatever, there's a lender or two, there's whatever. So making sure that you're touching base and keeping those relationships going, and they know you're still there, and doing something, for them. You know what I mean? It's not always just gimme. It's got to be a win-win type situation. So making sure that your sources are still intact is important.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's important. And I think that the higher you go in the business world and the more you grow personally, the more selective you have to be around who is that group that you count on or counsel with, because for a lot of people, you become that person for a lot of people, and it's important to keep looking for that person. You said something a couple of minutes ago about you've had the opportunity to lead a lot of different groups, both inside and outside the military, different size groups. I know you do some leadership within your congregation and things like that as well. But I actually wanted to talk to you a little bit about leadership today, because I think we live in a world where a lot of times the most recognized leaders tend to be the loudest. And one of the things that I've always just really admired about your leadership style is you don't have a lot to say, but when you do say something, I'm like, hey, Cory's got something to say here. Let's listen. And I think that's such a powerful leadership style that you have, is where you have that validity and that pensive piece of it, where you're coming to the table of like, hey, when I have a comment or something to say, there's some impact and breadth behind it, as opposed to, I think a lot of leaders are like, I'm going to say a lot of things and hopefully one of them is important. Any thoughts on your leadership style that you'd like to share with us?
I think, you run into leaders that talk a lot because they aren't sure. If you're not sure, and don't take that for, everything. That's not what I mean.
Yeah.
If you're humble enough to ask the questions and to learn and be a continuing learner, you're going to be pretty sure of yourself. Generally, you can be in most situations where you got a pretty good idea of where you're going to go, right? And it doesn't have to be a giant step, right? It could be, hey, we're going to take a little step, we're going to refocus, and we're going to go this direction. We don't know how far we're going to go, and I'll be able to tell you that, but we're going to refocus and we're going to go that direction. I think people feel like they have to have all of the answers. No one has all the answers, let's face it, right?
Yeah.
The sooner that you recognize that, and we were able to take those little steps and get that going, people see that and they're like, oh, I think I could follow that guy, and he's not going to lead me off the cliff right off the bat, that kind of thing. So small corrections lead to big steps in the end, right? We used to use a saying, in shooting, slow is fast, and that kind of applies outside of that realm too. When you're at the range or you're on a mission or you're doing something and stuff comes up, slow is fast. So make sure you do your proper mechanics. And of course, that happens faster and faster as you practice, but slow is fast. And that's something that a lot of people aren't humble enough, I think, is part of the problem. And from what I see today, a lot of people leadership has become a buzzword, right? Unfortunately. It takes a lot to become a real leader. Like, a real leader is somebody that's willing to learn. They've got some experiences. They've had people that have come with them, and they're not in it just for themselves, right? And a lot of people forget that part of leading, right? If we look at Jesus, who, in my opinion, was the best leader ever, he didn't do anything for himself. So that's something that's a really easily forgotten piece in this. Everybody laughs at me when I say it, but in America, we live in a nerf world. It's a nerf society, right? It's soft, it's easy. Anybody can, at least you have opportunities, that kind of thing. I've been all over the world where it is definitely not nerf when you get outside of the United States. So anyways, those lessons learned from experience and leadership are easy to convey if you're willing to think about something and be humble and listen to other points of view. And then that's why when I speak, I've listened, I understand the issue, and I've got something to say about it.
Yeah, no, I love that approach to leadership, and I agree. I think John Maxwell's still one of the greatest influences of leadership or experts on leadership there is, and I just really love his definition of leadership being leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And I think that a lot of the leaders of today feel like they should be the leader because of what they've done as a technician, and not their approach to what's the impact or influence I'm going to have on other people. Yeah. So I think that was really, really well said on the leadership piece.
When it comes to positional leadership versus earned leadership, right? That's a big deal when it comes to anybody in the military is going to know that. Sports teams, those kind of things. And then of course in business, you get into smaller teams, 30 or people or whatever, you're earning that leadership, or you just don't have it. That positional leadership is going to wear off, and that person's see you later. After a while, they're going to see that and they're out of there.
Yeah. And I think it's getting to the point where people, they don't even accept the positional leadership. A lot of times they want to fight it because they feel like I should be that leader. So they fight that positional leadership. And then as you're very well aware, that next level of leadership is permission leadership. Are they permitting me to lead? Are they permitting me to be in that role on their end? Which I think is I just love his teaching on that. Where did you learn that style of leadership? Is that something that you've just kind of picked up bits and pieces over time, or did you have some really good examples of leadership where you're like that? And I know you mentioned Jesus as a leader, and throughout your career, was there somebody that really stuck out to you as like, that's a leader?
Yeah, I've had good and bad examples. Just probably everybody has.
Yeah.
But yes, as you're kind of getting formed when you first get in the military, if you will, right? It's kind of just like anything else. You're young and impressionable, and I had both good and bad pretty quickly within entering the military. And my bad, all right, I've learned a few things that I definitely will not do when I am in charge of people. And then I had a phenomenal gentleman that was, he was just a hardcore, awesome guy. He was in the military for a long time. He had made all the way up to enlisted as an E7, then he switched over and he was all the way up to a lieutenant colonel on the officer side. So he knew, we used to tease him that he was a tail gunner on a dinosaur. So but he was awesome. Like, he knew how to take care of the troops. He had learned it's not about me. And he demonstrated that on a daily basis, through a lot of different ways. And so seeing that contrasting, okay, this is definitely not what I'm going to do. This guy is, there's people that I would have done anything. And that's, when you feel that, all right, those are things that I need to make notes of. So
Yeah.
making notes, keeping track.
Yeah. I love that. And it's been interesting looking back over my life, and I'm sure you're similar. It's like you have those really impactful people that almost in the moment, sometimes you don't realize that how big of an impact they're having on you until you kind of enter that next season of life where you're like, where did I learn this? You're like, oh, this came from so-and-so.
Oh yeah.
You're like, we are such a product of our experiences and people we embrace, which takes on when you think about it that way, this is always humbling for me when I start recognizing like how I've become what I've become through what lessons and what traits I've embraced from people. It almost is really humbling then to flip it on the other side to think like, okay, well, I've been part of other people's journey along the way. Am I leaving people better than when I found them? Or are they going to get to a position down the road where they look back and be like, oh, I learned that from Marcus, or I picked this up from Marcus, right? So it's humbling when you flip it the other way to be like, am I being that person for somebody else in some way?
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting, Rhonda and I get to see that firsthand, which is kind of cool. We do a lot of marriage mentoring in our church. And it's interesting to see that. It's pretty awesome to go walk through something with someone and then see them successfully doing things down the road, and everybody's learned things and they'll come back to you and, say things. And that reassurance is very humbling, and it is, it's a big responsibility.
It is. That is leadership is that it is a responsibility. And a lot of times people that are seeking leadership opportunities don't realize that burden's not the right word. Responsibility is the right word. The responsibility that comes with it, and it can be heavy.
Oh yeah.
And rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And that's where, you got to be learning all the time. I can't say that enough, because that's a big, that consistency and learning are huge.
Yeah. Well, let's shift topic just briefly, because it's a really apparent to everybody how successful you are in building your business, and your name's very well known in our industry. But I want to talk about how you're able to maintain balance, right? Because your business is big enough that you could easily get sucked in on a day-to-day basis, and it can consume all your time plus some. But one of the things I've really loved about your career is you've been able to continually grow as a business and still maintain your personal relationships, your fitness, serving in your church and things like that. How do you approach that in a purposeful way to make sure that you're maintaining balance and succeeding across multiple platforms? So
first and foremost, there is no such thing as perfect balance, right? I think we can agree on that right now.
Yeah.
I would say the number one thing is having a calendar. I know that sounds basic and it sounds simple and easy, but having a calendar is absolutely vital to being in the moment when you're somewhere. Instead of thinking, I should be doing this or I should be doing that. No, if it's on my calendar, that's what I'm supposed to be doing, and I can fully invest in that. We have a family calendar. Everybody knows if it's not on the calendar, it's not happening. And that has really given us our guide, if you will. And then, like I said, you got to plug in when you're in those situations. So.
Yeah, love that. Do you have a pretty regimented morning routine personally? Is that morning routine important to you, or what does that look like? What does that look like for you?
We wake up, and then I used to wake up really early. When I was active duty, I was up at 05 easily every day and gone. But we wake up at 0600 or so, and then we get up and we spend some time, obviously, with each other. Get woke up, and we work out together. We have a saying that if you sweat together, you stay together. So we've been doing that for many, many years, and that's a big part of our life. Fitness is important to us. So we do that, and that takes up some of our morning. And then after that, it's time to get to the office. It's kind of funny because everybody works from home now, but we know, all right, we're starting to take phone calls. We're starting to do the things that we're supposed to do, take care of our people, all that stuff. So our morning is, we spend several hours together in the morning to make sure that we are are doing the right things.
I love that. I love that statement. If you sweat together, you stay together. I think that's true. It reminded me real briefly of my dad taught me growing up, was like, hey, if you go through hard things with someone, you're bonded for life. And obviously that does count for your spouse, but also some of my closest friends. We went through something horrible together, right? Or we went and did, like, next weekend, I'm going to hike Kings Peak in a day and back. So it's a 50K. And if you do that with someone, you tend to, like, be bound to them if you go through something like that.
Yeah.
So I love that mentality. And it made me think too with my teams, with all the different companies and stuff, is same thing from a retention standpoint. If you go through and overcome an obstacle together, it really binds you together.
Yeah, 100%. I've got military guys that I could call them right now and say I need help, and they'd get on a plane. They wouldn't even tell anyone. So yeah, that's 100% accurate. We've been through some hell and back, and I would do anything for those guys, and the same thing. And obviously your spouse is somebody that let's face it, we go ups and downs, and we got all kinds of craziness. You got kids, and you got all kinds of stuff. So when you go through all of that, yeah, that binds you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I want to start wrapping up our conversation out of respect for time, but I did want to ask this question. The world's going through a lot of shifts and changes right now. Our industry, in the real estate industry, the economy is going through some shifts and changes right now. There's a lot of business owners in panic right now, thinking the world's coming to an end. But I know I see you stay calm and collected through adversity. What are you doing anything different in your approach to the economy and the changes in the industry right now with your business that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so obviously, if you know history, right, we've been through things, and history is the best teacher. So a lot of people that freak out, I would tell them, hey, whatever business you're in, whatever type of situation you feel like you're in, go ahead and look back into the history of that particular type of business, or that organization, or whatever it is, and you'll see there'll be some comfort there that, hey, we can do this, we can get through it. Now, is it going to take more work? Sure, it's going to be more work. And then the little things, right? You tighten them up. You make sure you're doing the little things all the time. Sometimes when everybody gets fat and happy, certain things I'll make an hour less of phone calls, or all whatever. Accountability isn't as stringent, that kind of stuff. Tightening up all those things, making sure that you've got a good plan in place. You've checked your history on it. You've checked your intel, made sure that that's verified. This is the plan. This is how we're going to step through it. And then you just keep on moving. That's and it gives everybody around you also a feeling of, okay, well, that's what we're doing. Makes sense. The numbers show that. So, all right. Yes, it's going to suck. I wore my shirt today.
I saw that. I love it. Embrace the suck.
But that is, everybody around me knows that, hey, sometimes that's the case, but we will get through it, and, we'll all be multimillionaires on the other side. So yeah, that's what can happen.
And I think your customers too, they're living in uncertainty. And when they see you as their source, their guide, being like certain and solid and confident, they're just going to be even more attracted to that as a source. You said this so beautifully, and it all falls in alignment with what we've been talking about for the last 30-40 minutes. But a minute ago, you had made mention of the tactical level versus the strategic level. I think times like this, agents and entrepreneurs want to fall back and purely play in the strategic level of what's everyone doing. Let's talk about it. Let's think about it. Then let's talk about it some more. Then think about it some more. And let's talk about it some more. And I think we have to get into the strategic level for a minute, gather the intel, as you were saying, source it out, go to our resources, our board of directors per se. And then it's time to double down on the tactical level. It's not do less activity. It's decide what activity you believe to be best and double down. It's time to get to work, embrace the suck. And I'm in agreement with you. The people that have that mentality and can embrace that and double down on their activities will come out in a better position on the other side of the shift than they were beforehand.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Any last words of advice you would want to leave with our community today?
Yeah, I mean, be humble, be consistent, and love others.
That should be some pretty serious life advice right there, right? If the world could just live by those three things,
Yeah,
imagine that this would be a great place for my grandkids to grow up in.
100%.
If any of you want to reach out to Cory and Rhonda, they're one of the top teams in Northern Utah. What's the best way for them to follow up with you, Cory?
Yeah, so our website, you guys can probably put it on the notes or however you do that, but utahgreenproperties.com is our website. It's also our, Cory and Rhonda at kw.com is our email, and we're here to help. We'll do whatever, make sure everybody's taken care of.
Okay, well, Cory, I know you're busy, and I appreciate it in multiple levels. I appreciate you sharing some time today. I appreciate you as a partner with me in several investments, and I just really admire you and appreciate you as a mentor and friend. So thank you for spending some time with me today. Enchilada Nation, I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I did. I took pages of notes. I'm excited to go add these to my journal and reflect on them and think on them and think about how I can apply them better in my own world. And I encourage you to do the same. And don't forget, go live life on your terms. Thanks, everybody.